Okay, I'm going off topic here just for a second. Kickstarter.com. I'll put the link in the description box. This is a website for people who are trying to raise money for various creative endeavors like, theater, publishing, stuff like that. It's a really cool thing this website does, and I'm doing some stuff with a bunch of people who are trying to use this to get some funding for an independent film project. They're trying to raise a couple $100. And if you guys feel like donating any money to this, that would be awesome, and thank you very much. If not, that's cool too. I'm not asking for any handouts here. I just promised these guys that I'd plug this for them. That's all. So, with that out there now, let's get to business. With all the talk recently that TNA might be rebranding itself and really focusing on pushing this Impact Wrestling moniker, there were a few things I was scratching my head about. Mainly, why are they trying to push themselves as wrestling when they have far less wrestling on their show than the company that considers wrestling a dirty word? Pretty much ever since Russo became head writer a few years ago, the wrestling has been portrayed as the least important thing about the TNA product. And now you want to call yourselves wrestling just because WWE doesn't anymore? Well, it's not that simple. You can't just call yourself something and have people believe it. You have to make changes to the show so that the product reflects that. And if this episode was any indication, it looks like they could be taking steps to do this. I don't expect it to last very long, but you know something? For 1 week, Impact actually resembled a pro wrestling show, which at this point is, well, let's face it, it's pretty damn surprising. Some of the matches were actually presented as if they were not completely meaningless. They didn't beat us half to death with promos and backstage segments. In fact, by TNA standards, those things were kind of de-emphasized this week. Also, the show felt a lot more organized than usual. There wasn't as much clutter, and as a result, they were able to make individual segments stand out more. And there's always a give and take when they do this. It seems like to make this happen, they always have to leave certain feuds off the show for a week. In this case, the tag team title picture and the X Division title picture were not addressed. Second week in a row that happened, by the way. I don't think any of those guys even appeared this week. But had those storylines been on the show, they would have had to cram a lot more stuff in, and we would have just run into the same old problem they constantly have with Impact of just booking too damn much. This is why they really need a second weekly show. If they had one, they could book Impact like this more often, then take the stuff they didn't have time for and put it on the other show, and we wouldn't have gaps like this where certain feuds would have to disappear for weeks at a time just so Impact wouldn't have to be breakneck pace just to cram everything in. There were two really big changes that I noticed this week. Number one, some of the wrestling actually felt like it mattered. Christopher Daniels and Gunnar got into a fight last week, so here they had a match. No stupid gimmicks or superfluous backstage crap, just a straight-up match that goes longer than 2 minutes with a clean finish. JB did the intros for the main event world title match, and they actually let it go for a little while, which made it look more important. Mickie James comes out and thanks the fans for supporting her and stuff. Yeah, maybe that promo wasn't really necessary, but once in a while it's good to do things like this to put over title wins because it makes them seem more meaningful. And considering the way the lockdown match with Madison Rayne played out, I think they really needed to do that. Number two, it looks like they're finally starting to make a real effort to get some of these new characters over, specifically Gunnar and Crimson. They're starting to portray Gunnar as Hogan and Bischoff's go-to guy in Immortal. He has a match with Christopher Daniels, he goes over clean, and the match isn't that bad. First decent performance you've had in TNA, Gunnar. Congratulations, it only took you a year. And yeah, I'm still not sold on this guy, but having a good performance and a clean win over Christopher Daniels, I mean, at least he looks like he has a shred of credibility now, and that's a start. I don't like Daniels jobbing again. I suspect most people didn't, but we can't get everything we want. Then you got Crimson, who now looks like they're trying to build him up as, like, Samoa Joe-esque, since he hasn't been beaten yet, and they're trying to push this as a win streak. Admittedly, that one's a little hard to swallow. Crimson really hasn't had that many matches yet, and a lot of them have had DQ finishes or were multi-man matches where He didn't lose, but he didn't win either. And technically, he hasn't been pinned or submitted yet, but to call what he has a win streak is being kind of generous. You want to give him a real win streak? You have him wreck shop for a few months, winning matches clean and decisively, have no one even come close to beating him, and then you do the Samoa Joe comparison. Then it'll make sense. Nevertheless, they did have Samoa Joe acknowledge Crimson, and he was being competitive with Joe for a few minutes, minus that one botch. Not as effective as it could be, but they're making an effort to turn this guy into something. But if they want this to work, Crimson has to go over Abyss at Sacrifice. He has to. And again, I really don't see that happening because Hogan is way too protective of Abyss, but we'll see. As far as the other talking points are concerned, they've been cooling it with the opening Immortal promos lately. I like that. But if the alternative is opening segments like this one, then man, I almost started wishing Hogan and Bischoff would come out again. And Karen Jarrett's got all these women in the ring, accusing them, one at a time, of being Kurt Angle's mistress. Ha-ha! She even accuses Tessmacher, who apparently still works there. Who knew? And this just went on, and on, and on, and it was absolutely painful. Did we really need to have Karen accusing the catering lady and the seamstress? Was that necessary? I mean, the knockout's okay, but you're eating up an awful lot of time here. This was way longer than it needed to be. I mean, you could have shaved at least 5 minutes off this segment, but Karen just keeps talking and talking and talking and talking, and she won't shut up! And if the mistress does turn out to be Isis the Amazon, like I'm afraid it will, I'm really not looking forward to it whatsoever. I mean, from what I know about her, Isis has nothing to offer this company aside from being 7 feet tall. This just screams knee-jerk reaction to WWE signing Awesome Kong. We all know that's what this is really about. All I can do is hope and pray that cooler heads prevail and they give the spot to someone else. If Serena Deeb would be cool, Jennifer Blake, just someone talented, please. That's all I'm asking for here. Just get somebody talented. So eventually, finally, the segment ends, and it segues into Velvet Sky versus Angelina Love. I still don't like this storyline at all. I have no idea what they're going for with this brainwashed gimmick they've stuck Angelina with, but apparently part of this gimmick is that she has to be kind of slow and robotic in matches, which basically amounts to her half-assing it in the ring. And that's dumb because Angelina's normally pretty reliable in that regard. And if she's going to be feuding with Velvet Sky, easily the worst knockout worker on the roster, a gimmick like this is the last thing in the world she needs because it's up to her to carry the match, but the gimmick pretty much makes that impossible. This match was awful and boring. Velvet Sky is terrible. And Angelina's brainwashed gimmick just dragged this thing down even further. Then there was a Mexican America promo, and the longer this goes on, the more I think this faction really does not click at all. I like Sarita and Rosita, they're fine, but they're not the problem. The problem is Hernandez just does not have the mic skills or the charisma to lead a faction, and Anarchia is not helping. That guy doesn't seem to be any good on the mic or in the ring. In fact, you know what he's like? He's like some really hammy, overacting Chavo Guerrero impersonator. That's what he comes off as. And I think this just goes to show that Homicide was really the linchpin that made LAX work as well as they did. I mean, you replace Homicide with this clown and the whole thing falls apart. So then Chris Sabin came out and Anarchia beat him in about 2 minutes. Hated that. Absolutely hated it. But it probably wasn't the planned finish because Sabin apparently injured his knee. I still don't know if that was real or not. I mean, this was taped 2 weeks ago, and if the injury was real, I think we probably would have heard something about it. And I don't know if they would have done that YouTube video about it if it were real. I mean, they usually don't do that when wrestlers get injured, but they're doing so much of this work-shoot stuff lately that it's just hard to be sure sometimes. I really hope it's a work, because, goddamn, and that sucks. I mean, just when Shelley was ready to come back, too. I mean, I love seeing Shelley back, and hopefully they'll do something with him in the meantime. But man, this Sabin thing has really got me bummed out. If it's a work, it's a really good one, and I really hope that's all it is. And the last thing I'll talk about is Samoa Joe. Abyss came out and attacked Crimson during their match, and Joe just kind of shrugged it off and left. He's like, now fuck this noise. You want that guy so bad you can have him. And there's 2 ways to take this. One is that Joe feels threatened by Crimson, which I guess would make sense given the angle that they're doing. Maybe it's just a straight up heel turn, or maybe it's both. I don't know. But so far I like it, because Joe needs to turn heel in the worst way possible, and he's needed that for a while now. Pretty much ever since they made him lose a feud to Jeff Jarrett. I mean, this guy usually ends up spinning his wheels as a babyface, but a cold motherfucker who gets off on hurting people and doesn't give a shit about anyone but himself, that's Joe. That's the character he needs to go back to. And if they could build Joe back up as a monster heel and have Crimson go through Abyss and then build up to a match with these guys at a big pay-per-view, I'd like to see that. Maybe not at Slammiversary, that'd be a little too soon, I think, but at some point in the future, definitely. So that's about it. Despite the problems, I enjoyed Impact more than usual. I just hope they can keep that going. I don't really have anything to add about the Jay Lethal thing. I think it's all been said by now. You know, to cut a talented guy like him when you've got idiots like Rob Terry and Orlando Jordan taking up space on your roster is just... well, I don't know what they're thinking. I mean, I wrote a blog all about it. I'll put the links down there. I mean, if you want to read my detailed thoughts on it. Otherwise, I'd really just rather not dwell on this anymore. Sorry this video was late. I try to get them up by Saturday normally, but I had some stuff going on this weekend and I just didn't have time to do it until now. And that happens. You know, real life just gets in the way sometimes. So, I'll try to get it done faster next week. See ya.
On this very, very dangerous path. I think the most important news we've heard tonight, much more important than even the death of Osama bin Laden, is the fact that we lost no troops, no American soldiers. It's a very, very, very dangerous situation that they put themselves in harm's way to go and do the business of this country. I think that we're a blessed country tonight, Wolf. As a New York City firefighter who survived both September 11th and illness diagnosed from my time at September 11th. I'm proud to be an American tonight. I'm proud of our men and women in the service. I'm proud of the special operations, and I know that I speak for every member of the New York City Fire Department when I say that I hope to God he rocks in hell.
I know how that's how you feel. Kenny Speck is a New York City firefighter. Tell us where you were, Kenny, on 9/11.
Wolf, I got to the site of the Trade Center after both World Trade Center towers had collapsed.